Welcome back to the channel Nation of Glory, where we bring you the stories that shine, the journeys that inspire, and the lives that remind us that even in the world of fame, the strongest battles are often fought silently. Today, we share the deeply emotional, powerful, and beautifully human story of a woman who was born into unimaginable spotlight, unimaginable expectation, and unimaginable pressure, yet she turned her pain into art, her trauma into strength, and her identity into a message of resilience. This is the story of Paris-Michael Katherine Jackson, the daughter of a global legend, but more importantly, a woman carving her own name, her own music, her own truth in a world that expected her to remain in someone else's shadow. To understand her journey, we must begin with the world she was born into. From the very first moment of her life on April 3, 1998, Paris Jackson was surrounded by cameras, headlines, worldwide attention, and a family legacy that shook the planet. She was born in Beverly Hills as the second child and only daughter of Michael Jackson, one of the most iconic, influential, and groundbreaking entertainers the world has ever known. But to a little girl, he wasn't an icon. He wasn't the king of pop. He was her father, her safe space, her friend, her teacher, her guide. And because of that, from her earliest days, Paris lived between two worlds: the bright, blinding world of global fame, and the quiet, intimate world of a daughter who adored her father beyond words. Growing up, Paris experienced a kind of life that few people can ever imagine. She lived inside a bubble built out of love, protection, and necessity. Her father shielded her from the media, from the chaos, from the expectations that followed their family everywhere. He wanted her to have a childhood, a real childhood, even as the world watched their every move. Paris often spoke about this part of her life with pride and warmth, explaining how her father gave her and her brothers discipline, kindness, creativity, and strength. He taught them empathy. He taught them to see people for who they are, not for their fame. And most of all, he taught them love. But love, especially the love of a parent, becomes even more powerful when it is lost. In 2009, when Paris was just 11 years old, the unthinkable happened. The world mourned Michael Jackson. But while billions saw a legend fall, 3 children lost the center of their universe. For Paris, this moment shattered her. Her grief wasn't just the loss of a global icon, it was the loss of her father, the man who protected her from everything. Suddenly, the world felt bigger, colder, noisier, and far less safe. And for the first time, she was truly exposed to the public eye. The grief Paris carried was more than a child should ever have to bear. But life did not give her time to hide. She was thrust into interviews, court hearings, headlines, and documentaries. She stood on a stage at her father's memorial, speaking words far beyond her years, and in that moment, the world saw her pain. Raw, honest, and heartbreaking. And yet, even then, you could sense a spark inside her. A spark that refused to dim. As she entered her teenage years, Paris began battling internal storms that most people never saw. The pressure of being Michael Jackson's daughter, the constant media attention, the overwhelming grief, and the struggle to figure out who she was in a world that already believed it knew everything about her, all of this weighed heavily. She faced emotional battles, depression, self-doubt, and a deep feeling of not fitting in anywhere. But here is where her story becomes incredibly inspiring. Instead of letting the world shape her, she began shaping herself. Paris found expression through creativity. Art became her therapy. Music became her voice. Tattoos became her stories carved into skin, each one representing healing, memories, or emotion. She began exploring modeling, not as a way to chase fame, but as a way to reclaim her identity. She stepped into acting, not because Hollywood demanded it, but because she wanted to understand characters, stories, and emotions beyond her own. Slowly, she was beginning to discover who Paris Jackson truly was, not the daughter of a legend, not the girl the world judged, but the artist, the individual, the soul within. Her modeling journey took off when the world finally saw her as more than a last name. Paris graced magazines, walked runways, and captured hearts not because of who her father was, but because of her natural presence, soft yet strong, delicate yet bold, ethereal yet grounded. She carried a beauty shaped by emotion, and that authenticity drew people to her. But the most powerful chapter of her life would not come from modeling or acting, it came from music. In 2020, Paris signed a deal with Republic Records. This moment symbolized much more than a contract. It symbolized a legacy transforming into something new. She wasn't following her father's footsteps. She wasn't trying to replicate his sound. She was creating her own. For the first time, Paris opened her heart completely to the world through her debut album, Wilted. The music was haunting, emotional, vulnerable, and poetic. It blended indie folk, alternative, and soft rock, soundscapes that carried sadness, hope, longing, love, and self-discovery. Through her lyrics, she allowed listeners to see the real her, the battles she fought, the wounds she carried, and the strength she slowly rebuilt. The world began to understand that Paris Jackson was not living in anyone's shadow. She was stepping into her own light. But her story is not only about art. It is also about courage. Paris has never been afraid to speak openly about mental health, trauma, identity, and acceptance. She has used her platform to spread compassion, raise awareness, and remind people that healing is not linear. Many people look at fame and assume it protects someone from suffering, but Paris stands as proof that everyone, no matter their last name, faces struggles. And by sharing her truth, she has helped countless others feel less alone. Over the years, Paris also became an advocate for causes close to her heart: environmental protection, human rights issues, animal welfare, and mental health awareness. She uses her voice not to amplify fame, but to amplify kindness. Along her journey, Paris discovered her personal style, sense of freedom, and independence. She embraced who she was meant to be, not who the world assumed she should be. She has lived openly, honestly, unapologetically, whether talking about relationships, identity, creativity, or her spiritual outlook on life. And with every step, she continued to grow stronger. Her family, especially her brothers Prince and Blanket, remained her anchor. Their bond strengthened over the years, proving that despite the pressures surrounding them, they were united by love and by the teachings of their father. Paris often describes her siblings as her protectors and her support system, and together, they honor the memory of Michael Jackson with grace. But perhaps the most beautiful part of Paris Jackson's story is how she transformed her pain into purpose. She could have crumbled under the weight of expectation. She could have allowed grief to define her. She could have lived her entire life trying to imitate a legend she admired. But instead, she built something new. She created music, art, identity, and direction that reflected her inner world. And she embraced vulnerability, turning it into her superpower. Her journey is still unfolding. She continues to grow as a musician, expanding her sound and exploring deeper emotional territory. She continues modeling and acting, not for fame, but for artistic exploration. And she continues using her platform to uplift others. In a world that often tries to define people by their lineage or mistakes, Paris stands as a symbol of self-creation. She is not just Michael Jackson's daughter. She is Paris Jackson, a multidimensional artist, a survivor, and a soul with a message. Her life teaches us that healing is not something that happens overnight. It is a slow, beautiful process of picking up the pieces of ourselves, shaping them into something new, and discovering that even brokenness can become art. She shows us that the greatest legacy anyone can build is not one they inherit, but one they create with their own hands. Paris Jackson's story is not about fame, it is about strength. It is about identity. It is about the courage to live authentically in a world that constantly watches and judges. It is about rising from grief, embracing creativity, and becoming a voice for those who feel unseen. And her story is still being written. Thank you for joining us today on this emotional and inspiring journey through the life of Paris-Michael Katherine Jackson. If you enjoyed this powerful story and want more legendary journeys, more inspiring transformations, and more deep Hollywood narratives, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, and share this video with someone who loves these incredible stories. This is the Channel Nation of Glory. Thank you for watching, and stay legendary.